Okay, today I want to go over some targets and stuff that I've made and some templates. I want to show you guys how to make the templates so you can make your own targets. These are some of the ones. The one in the back there is the IDPA target. And we got a couple of bullseyes. You can see the template on the top here in the front is just a small bullseye for a rifle and with a scope. But I'm going to go over this real quick with you. I'm going to try to make it real quick. To just show you how to make these templates so that you guys have something to shoot at. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to start with the bullseye targets and stuff. These are real easy to make. If you just have a router, you can make not a template, but a jig like I made for my router. And here's what it is. I just have a little trim router right now that's hooked onto a piece of plexiglass with a bunch of holes in it. So you just fasten your router, take your original plate off their base off the router, fasten this this jig to it. All it has is a bunch of little holes, so you can they're pretty much evenly spaced at like 1/4 of an inch. And so what I do is I'll set I'm using 1/8 inch hardboard for these targets. I'll set the targets on a piece of cardboard and find the center point and nail just put a nail through there, and then clip the top off of the nail so it fits into these holes. And what you can do is set this down here and just follow that around, and you're going to cut the perfect circles. On this one, in order to get on this big one, I didn't do this. I started from the outside. You always got to start from the outside and work your way in. But I didn't take into account that I needed to make all my rings even, which it kind of turned out pretty good on this one anyway, because the rings got smaller as I went into the center. But on this one, all the rings are the same. So what you need to do is measure out on your jig here and find the first hole that you want to use so that you get the size of your center piece, which would be this round piece here. Find the size on that, and then count out however many marks you want. I went 5 marks out on each one of these, and you end up with perfect circles. So that's pretty much all you're going to do on those. Once you get those done, you'll have the opening on your frame board, and so then you can set these rings in there and get the rings all centered so they're all even. And then what I do is I take a piece of just a stick and I set it on edge. It's probably a 3/4 inch stick by maybe a 1/4 inch thick. I try to keep it narrow because when you paint, if you lay it sideways, if you lay it down flat, you're going to have a bunch of voids in your target. This way, the spray actually goes under the stick and kind of fills all that in. So you can. I'll show you. Here's one on the IDPA target where you can see the little bit of a void in the line, and you can see those some places. And I'll show you more on that later. But when I was making these before, I was laying these sticks down flat, and I'd have to fill all the lines in with marking pen. Okay, so you glue the sticks down. I glue the sticks. I usually mark the sticks where the voids are, or where the lines are at, so I don't get any glue in those. I don't want glue going underneath that. So I use liquid nails, and I just put liquid nails on the stick in between all my marks, and then just turn my stick over and lay it down right on top of the thing. And then I don't mess with it for a little while until everything's dry. And then I go ahead and put these sticks on to make the sides more rigid and everything. So when you pull this thing out, it's nice and solid. It doesn't flop around or anything. Once you get it all centered up again, after you get this all glued together, you got to get your outside line, glued even all the way around. And then I take these last 2 pieces of board, and I set them up against here, get a notch so the notch is as tight as I can get it, and that way you don't have any room for slop. It just it stays there. It'll retain the target in its proper position. And I make 2 of those. I'll just set the board up there and just mark the slots with a pin. And then I take it over to a saw and radial arm saw or something and just notch it out. and then I go ahead and glue those on when I have this the rest of the target in place. I'll glue these on, and you're pretty much done with it. I'm gonna go over this IDPA target. Here's one more little target before we do that. This is the little one, and here's what I'm talking about with these end sticks. I'll just take them like this, set them down like this, make a mark right where the edges of these two go, and then I try to keep them nice and tight. And this is done with an 1/8 inch router bit as opposed to the bigger one being done with a 1/4. So when you're working with an 1/8 inch router bit, you're gonna have to make sure that these notches are tight against here, because you don't have as much space to work with on your lines. So when I glue these down, I'm gonna make sure that my lines are as perfect as I can get them and stuff, you know, so that these two circles are centered. And so I'm gonna put these notches are actually fairly tight, and that doesn't allow for any movement on the target itself. Okay, these are some of the targets that I've already completed, and I'll show you how to do that real quick. On this first Bullseye, I just started out with the whole insides taken out, painted the inside of that with a can of yellow spray paint. That increases the cost a little bit. I wouldn't normally do that, but I'm just trying to show what can be done with these targets. You can make them as kind of as fancy or as plain as you want. And normally, I think what I'll probably just do is just paint the black lines on the cardboard, and then I got another just a little template where I've cut out the hole saws where these blue ones are at, and I've cut those out with a hole saw in a different pattern. I just lay that on the cardboard, and that gives you a couple more things to shoot at on that piece of cardboard, so you don't run out of targets on there once you fill your Bullseye target with holes. So next we're going to go kind of over to these IDPA targets. You can find the dimensions of these IDPA targets online. So I found that I had it transferred to cardboard, and I'll show you. Well, here's okay. Sorry about that. Here's the original target that I had made up. I just followed the dimensions right off of the online picture that they had. So I once I got done with that, I cut those out. On the circle part of the chest here, I just did the same thing that I did on the Bullseye target. I didn't cut that out of that target because I didn't need to. I just needed the center hole. I pounded the nail in. I ran my router around the inside of the chest cavity, and then I went from there. So on this cardboard target, you can see that that's been cut out. So I cut that out and then traced everything onto my piece of 1/8 inch hardboard here, and started going from there. So the first thing I did was cut out the hole in the chest. I had a perfect center line, and that's where I started with, is the hole in the chest. And then I traced everything else onto the hardboard and started cutting. Okay, on this target, the first thing I did was transferred the outside dimensions there, or started cutting on the outside. So I actually measured the outside. I've got a little router base. I'm going to show you the base because you've already seen the router. So this is the base I'll use to cut this out. And what I do is I make the lines, and then I always want to keep my router bit to the inside of the lines, so your outside dimension is exactly the same as what is the as the IDPA dimensions on their targets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over real quick and show you how I cut this. And I'm not saying this is the right way or the wrong way, but this is how I cut this thing out. I cut the whole thing out with the router, and that gave me my pretty much perfect quarter inch lines for painting. Okay, so the first thing is you're going to have to imagine that there's a router on this, and the router bit comes down right through this where this edge of the target is at. So that's going to be the outside edge of my router bit. So I've measured the distance between the outside edge of my router bit to the straight edge, and I'm using a board here for a straight edge. And then I made this little measure so I didn't have to keep pulling out a tape measure. So what I do is set that board right back there, and I use this measure to go right to my lines. And so then when I take the router, I would put the router on here to start my lines. You might want to make your lines protrude out a little ways or whatever you want to do. But I'd start my line right here, and my router bit would plunge right into there, and then I'd come across here. Now until you get to the next line. So it's a little bit time consuming. I would have these clamped down with quick grips, the clamps on both ends, and then I would just go ahead and make the next cut, and I'd go all the way around, you know, with my little measuring stick, and get the distance between my router base. Now, one thing you're gonna have to keep in mind is these router bases aren't all the same on all the sides, so sometimes you get a little bit different dimensions. So what I do is mark my router, and I put a little arrow on my router base, so I know which side I'm using every time, and that way I know that my little measuring stick is going to be the same, and I can go just follow that around, and you know, cut the whole target out. Once I get the inside of the target out, then I went ahead and cut the outside of the target. I got the outside of the target done. Went ahead and cut these. Now, if you're doing an IDPA target, and you don't have to do you don't have to do anything. You can do any kind of targets you want using this method and stuff. But when you come across the top, you're going to come all the way across, and the head's going to be up above the thing. That's you're gonna keep this line straight across all the way, so everything works out right. Now on this one, after you get done with that, we've got the same setup on this. We've done the same thing as we did on the bullseye targets, and we notched each one of these. I started out with the stick going down the middle of this target and stuff from the bottom all the way up to the top. And then once I got that dried and everything, you know, and you could probably do it without letting that dry, but you know, sometimes things just move around. So you want to try to keep all your lines even, and then you can go ahead and glue these side lines on, or the sticks on the sides to hold everything rigid and solid. And when you pull it out, these are real solid. They don't go anywhere. But then after you get done with those sticks, then you're going to do the same thing as we did on the bullseye targets. You're gonna come down with the sticks, and it's really easy if you just set these sticks right against the pieces that are coming off the target here, and then just mark your notches. And whether they're tight or not, you want them tight. But if they're not super tight, on a 1/4 inch line, it's not as critical as it is on the 1/8 inch lines. So if they're not super tight, that's okay. I actually made one up there for the head to keep the head in place and everything too. So you can see it turns into a pretty simple project to make targets once you have the templates done. Okay, when you're painting these targets, what you want to do is you want to, maybe, I don't know if you can see this very well, but you want to keep your can up above the target, straight up, and you want to spray straight down onto the target. I'm not going to paint one of these because you guys can get the idea, but you want to stay about 8 to 10 inches away, and you want to go over the lines kind of quickly. You don't want to sit there and pour paint into those, because it leaches out and your lines on your targets will get thick. So make a single pass, just a kind of a quick pass, and then go over and make another pass and check your target, see what it looks like. Maybe it's dark enough, maybe it's not. If it's not, then go ahead and pull your template, see if your lines are dark enough. If not, it's really easy to line everything right back up to where he was. And and if it's not dark enough, just paint it again. But try not to spray at an angle like this, or so you're shooting under the. You don't want to shoot under your template, because again, then your lines get fat and they get fuzzy, and your target is kind of ruined. Yeah, just go ahead and make several passes on that, and you'll end up with a pretty nice target. Here's a couple of the targets that that I just painted yesterday. I think it takes only about 30 seconds to make these targets after you get your template done. So you got to invest a little bit of time to make the templates, but after that it's a pretty simple target to make, and you can make them in any shape. You can make these templates actually out of cardboard if you want, or whatever you got. I do most of my targets on cardboard. I get it from Sam's or Costco. It's free there. Cardboard's cheap if you can find it. You can also do these targets on